Swept, she said again. Isn't that strange? She put her hands in her coat pockets. The coat was pink with a white fur collar and hood. I remembered it from last year, when the sleeves were rolled up. Now the coat fit perfectly, and Samantha looked real pretty inside of it. She'd gotten taller than me, and I had to look up just a little bit when I talked to her. He's just some boy, Samantha. Nothing strange about that at all. And plus, Jesus wasn't white. Even your daddy says so. White people drew all those white person pictures of Jesus, but that wasn't his real color. You know that. That Jesus boy is white. The wind was blowing hard, a high whistling sound. He said he's not white, Samantha said. That boy is white, Samantha. You could almost see through his skin. He's like blue-white. That's even whiter than white. But, Samantha said calmly, he says he's not white. We don't know what the world looks like from inside his eyes. For all we know, you're white. What? Samantha looked confused, like she was just realizing what she was saying. After a moment, her face changed, though, and she smiled. Maybe Jesus is the color he needs to be when he comes to a place, Franny. Maybe this time around he needs to be a skinny white boy, something way different from everything around him. I shrugged. As long as you're not trying to make the brother man brown, girl. I don't think I'll mention it to Daddy, though, Samantha said, looking at me. Well, you know I'm not saying anything about it. It would be up there with me saying you believed in the Tooth Fairy and Santa, wouldn't it? Samantha smiled and shook her head. She started walking backward away from me, waving goodbye to me as she walked. Then she turned and walked faster. I watched her head down East Bay Road, getting smaller and smaller. I stood there a long time, shivering in the cold. A part of me stood there promising myself that from now on, I'd go to church more and listen to my grandma when she started preaching. But another part of me knew that the part of myself that was making those promises was lying. The wind got harder and I hugged myself. I stood there wishing I knew what the word surreal meant. I knew I wouldn't go home and look it up. I'm just not that kind of person. But standing there in the cold and the wind, the word felt big and important to me, like it was trying to wrap itself around me, like it was tapping itself on my head, trying to get in. I touched the frozen creek with the toe of my boot. Tiny spider lines spread everywhere. I squatted down and stared at them. My face looked long and brown and shadowy in the reflection. It looked like it was breaking into a million pieces. Some mornings, I woke up like the whole world was slipping away from me. Mama said it was just growing pains and soon they'd go away. I got up and turned around, wanting to yell for Samantha, wanting to hear her say more about anything. She had all kind of things she could believe in. Big and surreal things that took up her mind and got her thinking deep and smiling that secret, I know some things, smile. I stood there watching her walk away. It wasn't that she did believe that the Jesus boy was really Jesus. It was that she could. I couldn't. No way. It was too crazy, too way out there, too far away from me. The snow was starting to come down hard again, and in the distance, the only thing I could see was little specks of Samantha's bright pink coat, far away from me, fading in and out, in and out. Part 3, Chapter 7. Mama, I called, taking my boots off and leaving my knapsack by the door. Sean came out of Mama's room, frowning and waving his hands. She's sleeping, he signed, his hand moving over his face like it was pulling his eyes closed. It's not even 4 o'clock, I signed back, saying the words at the same time. Sean could read lips, but most times I was thinking too fast to talk slow enough for him to understand me. So I just signed right back at him. She's tired, Franny. I felt something jump inside of me, something hard and heavy. Don't start your stupid worrying, Sean said. She's just feeling tired. 3 years ago, Mama started complaining about her belly hurting. It took a long time for everybody to convince her to go to the doctor. She was still shaken from losing baby Lila and the miscarriage she'd had a year after that, so hospitals and doctors made her nervous. They always find something wrong, she said, drinking mint tea to calm the pain. But the pain didn't get calm, and a few weeks later, she went to the emergency room. That night, we found out that she'd had a baby growing but the baby wasn't thriving. That's the word the doctor used, thriving. And the next year, when my 4th grade teacher said to Mama, "Franny isn't thriving in science and math," my Mama's face had clouded over and tears came to her eyes. Mama stayed in the hospital for a long time after the non-thriving baby died. And the whole while she was in there, it felt like our family was holding its breath. Then, when the doctor said she was okay, we all started breathing again. But Mama came home quiet and sad, and for a long time, that's how she stayed. But the weeks passed, and Mama got better. Every morning, she'd get out of bed and hug me and Sean, calling us her gifts from God, her unbroken promises, her little lives. And some mornings, I'd find her sitting, holding the framed picture of Lila she kept at her bedside, a sadness on her face so deep, it seemed like no one would ever be able to break through it. The years passed, and the sadness went away, too. Mama laughed more and hugged us all the time. She and Daddy headed back to their church, and slowly, our house became this new kind of normal. "She's supposed to be all better," I signed, slinking down against the wall. I felt like I was 8 years old again, scared and mad at Mama for not being Mama. She had said she was all better. Sean smiled and shook his head. It wasn't a big smile, just more like a big brother smile. He's so beautiful, all tall and dark with pretty eyes and a nice big brother smile. If he wasn't deaf, he'd have a million girlfriends. Hearing girls were always looking at him. But most times, when they saw his hands flying through the air, they stopped looking, which was stupid to me. Sign language is just another language, and if they weren't so dumb, maybe they could learn to speak it. Once in a while, he'd tell us about a deaf girl in his school that liked him. Sometimes he liked her back. Sometimes he didn't. "She is all better," Sean signed. "Just relax. Help me make some dinner." "I don't want any dinner," I signed. "I want to kiss Mama's head." "Then go kiss it already." I tiptoed down the hall and stopped to look at the picture of Lila, her dark eyes staring back at me. Sometimes, Mama talked about the baby heaven, where Lila and the 2 other babies had gone. How maybe there was a whole other Wright Barnes family up there, fussing and laughing, eating and singing. I stood there staring at the picture. If Jesus came back to this world, I don't know what I'd want from him. I know what I'd ask, though. I'd say, "Mr. Jesus, I'm sorry to bother you, but I have a question. I wanted to know, how do you have hope?" I'd want to know, how do you have hope when there's always a Trevor somewhere kicking at somebody? When there's always a Mama somewhere who maybe wasn't thriving? And maybe he would look at me and smile the way Sean smiled, all patient and sorry for me. Maybe he'd have the calm look like the Jesus boy. Maybe he'd have that calm look like the Jesus boy. Maybe he'd have an answer. I opened Mama's door slowly and kneeled down beside her bed. It was almost dark now, and the light coming into her room was silvery and soft. Everything was so quiet. I could hear my own breath, and hers too, coming slowly. Her mouth was slightly open, and she looked real peaceful with her eyes closed and that little bit of silver light coming in on her dark face. She had the most perfect nose, not too big and not too small. I ran my finger over her eyebrows. They were thick, and then they got thin at the edges because she tweezes them that way. One day I'd get my eyebrows tweezed, even if it hurt, just so they could be perfect like Mama's. And maybe I'd get some false eyelashes so mine could be long and dark and beautiful like hers. I sat on her bed, pushed her hair away from her forehead, and kissed it. Mama opened her eyes. "Stop worrying," she whispered. I see you setting your mind to worrying already. I'm just tired, that's all. Mama looked like she wanted to say something more, but then didn't. She closed her eyes again. After a few minutes had passed, she opened them, looked at me, and smiled. Franny, everything's gonna be fine. I'm fine. Then why are you sleeping in the daytime? I moved a little bit closer to her. Her body felt warm. Because your mama gets tired sometimes, dealing with all you kids. It's just me and Sean. We're not that much work. Already feels like more most days. What do you mean it already feels like more? Mama touched me on the cheek. I don't want you worrying, Franny. That's all I'm saying, okay? I nodded. Wait until you have two. Then you can come and talk to me about what's a lot and what's not a lot. Mama smiled. I tried to move closer. Why don't you just sit on top of me, girl? She said, moving over on the bed. I want you to get up now, I said. I knew I sounded whiny, but I didn't care. Mama sighed. I can't, Franny. Not right now. In a little while, okay? I promise you. She looked at me. My face must have been all worried looking because she said, what's that old Marable Tanks talking about these days? Samantha sat down right at her table. And then I had to sit there because Samantha was sitting there. And then Marable was talking about stinky pennies and that the Jesus boy. Mama closed her eyes. The who? She said softly. The new boy. Everybody is saying he looks like Jesus. Only I don't think so because he's just a kid and all. Just that his hair is all. I could hear Mama breathing slowly. Maybe she was already asleep. Mama? Yes, baby. What's surreal? Your voice going when I'm almost asleep. No, it isn't. I mean, is that what it means? Like a dream, Mama said softly. Like something not feeling like it could be really happening. Does that make sense, sweetie? I nodded. Yeah. Like that boy just showing up. Like he was showing up in somebody's dream. And then you wake up and maybe he's not there anymore. Or maybe he is, but it's not as strange. People always wonder about the new kid. You know that. You were the new kid once. Only by a month, and that was because of the stupid chicken pox. But everyone looked at you like you were from the moon. At least that's how you described it. I tried to move closer to Mama some more. Well, they did stare. Of course they did, boo, Mama said. We told you again and again not to scratch, and you scratched anyway. So you had scabs all over your body. I would stare too. Thank God for vitamin E. It didn't clear them all up, I said, holding out my arm. I still have the 2 pock marks on my hand and some on your leg. I know, baby. Maybe your daughter will listen when you tell her not to scratch. Go help Sean get dinner going. I'm just going to rest a few minutes. Then I'll get on up. I kissed her forehead, but didn't move. Your mama sure is tired this evening. She didn't finish. After a while, her breath started coming all even, and I knew she was asleep. It's all so surreal, I whispered, stroking her forehead. Outside, the sky was getting darker. Some days it feels like it's always going to be wintertime. Mama reached up and pressed her hand on top of mine. We stayed like that for a long time.